This is a tutorial for Heat Pedal to the Metal, a racing game where you are playing cards to race around a track for a certain number of laps, try to be the first to cross the finish line, and using heat as a resource to get a boost when you need it, but cool down in order to not overheat and spin out. This game is played with a central board here, where you can see all of the cars that are going around. This is one of 4 or 5 different possible tracks. Each track has a number of laps that you do, in this case 3, and it consists of various corners with little speed markings and a finish line as well. In this case, we have 4 players in it and have added 2 automatic players. It's best to fill out some extra players so you have a full racing set. But typically you are in a turn choosing cards according to what gear level you are at, and then moving ahead that number on those cards. And then there's a few other little things that you can do to give you an extra boost or to cool down so you can boost later, and we'll explain how all of that works. So this is, again, is the central board with the racetrack on it, and all the cars are randomly lined up. You'll notice that each space has 2 spots in it, and if 2 people are in that same spot, the person that is ahead is the one next to the white line. In BGA, you can zoom in a bit here. There's a thick white line that's on one side of the track. You can see it on here. Whenever you see one of these, that means it's about to change sometimes, or it's just a curve. But here it stays the same. But then you can see here is where it changes. And it goes to this side here. And so whoever is closest to that, and then it comes back here for the rest of the lap. Whoever is closest to that white line is ahead if they're both on the same spot. So in this case, green is ahead of yellow, black ahead of blue, and so forth. Each player also has their individual boards, which in BGA you can zoom in and out if you need to try to see more or less. This shows your current hand of cards. You will start with 7 cards, and after each turn continue to refill to 7. But you have a deck that you draw from here, and then when you play cards you discard them here, and if you ever need to draw again and there's nothing left in this deck, you will shuffle these back and put them back in your pile. These are heat cards in this case, and in most tracks you will start with 6. And you can use those. They can go to your discard pile, and then when you cool down they go back into here. So this is something that will clog up your hand. You can't play them if they're in your hand, but you can use them to do things to get you an extra boost, to get you ahead. So the game, a lot of the game is about managing that heat, when to spend it, making sure you have enough to spend it when you need, and then cooling back down when you're preparing for some of those bigger spurts of speed. The game is played a series of rounds until somebody passes the finish line at the end of the last round. Then that person is the winner, but then it continues to play until every player has passed that finish line. On your turn, each player will first, and this is kind of the pattern that shows as a reminder some of the steps they go through, but each player will first choose their gear and their cards, and the gear is either 1, 2, 3, or 4, and that determines how many cards you can play on your turn. So if I'm in gear 1, I only get to play 1 card, and if I'm in gear 4, I get to play up to 4 cards. Well, I have to play exactly 4 cards. You can't choose to play less. Now, the benefits of being in first and second gear is you get extra cooldown by going, but obviously the downside is you go slower because you can't add up as many cards that are in your hand. Your hand consists of 3 of each of the 1 through 4 speed cards, so 3 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. In the starting upgrades, you have a 0 card, a 5 card, and a heat card as well. Plus, in this case, there are 3 stress cards in your hand, and we'll explain what those do, or in your deck, and we'll explain what those do in a minute. So, everybody chooses their gear and the number of cards and which cards they want to play. Now, everybody starts in first gear, and you can move 1 gear for free each turn. And the way that you do that in BGA is you just select that number of cards. So if I wanted to be in second gear, I would just select 2 cards, and that would say, oh, okay, you're moving into second gear. You can also jump 2 gears up or down if you need to quickly accelerate or decelerate, but it will cost you a heat. When you pay a heat, you're pushing one of these heat cards into your discard pile, which then gets shuffled in and appears in your hand, clogging it up because you cannot play those cards until you are able to cool those down. Again, cooling down happens if you're in a lower gear, or there's a couple other cases where you're able to do that. So everybody chooses. In this case, I can choose between 1 and 3 because I can't jump 3 gears at once. And then in turn, or in pole position order, so starting with the player furthest along on the track, you play those cards and you move that number of spaces. So if I chose a 2 and a 3 and I'm in second gear, or if I just chose a 2 and a 3, that would mean I'm moving up to second gear and I would move ahead 5 spaces. When you're moving, you always try to be closest to that racing line, that thick line, that if someone is there already, you would just be next to them. If you ever move and end your turn at or behind the spot that another player exists, you can slipstream. So if green were right here and yellow landed right behind it, I could slipstream, and slipstream gives you 2 plus 2 free movement basically. So instead of landing here, I could go 2 ahead. Or if I landed exactly next to that player, then I could move 2 ahead as well. Now, it's important to note that your speed is determined by the total numbers on your cards, and the slipstream does not add to that. So if I played a 2 and a 3, my speed would be 5. And if I slipstream and went 2 extra, even though I'm going 7 spots, I'm still only a speed of 5. You also have these cards, which are called stress cards. They just exist in your deck, and you have to deal with them because you cannot discard them or get rid of them. The only way that you can cycle through them in your deck is by playing them. When you play a stress card, you play it instead of one of your cards that you're playing for the turn, and when it's your turn, you start flipping over cards and until you find one of these speed cards, the 1 through 4. The 0 doesn't work, the 5 doesn't work, heat cards don't work. If any of those come up, they just go straight into your discard. When you do find one of those, it goes in place or on top of that stress card, and that counts towards your speed. So this is kind of unpredictable. You play a stress card, and you can get anywhere from 1 to 4 added to your speed for that stress card. As you're going along, you are taking turns here, and each turn has a speed limit, speed indicator here that says when you pass that mark, if you are going above that speed, you have to pay heat indifferent. That makes up the difference. So if I played my 3 and my 4 and a 7 and I ended up going past that 5, that 7 would be 2 more than 5, and I would have to pay 2 heat. And again, that doesn't mean that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you need to use heat to get that advantage, and you have that's 6 heat to work with and 1 in your hand. So it is good to cycle through that heat, to use it up to get a boost, and then to cool it back down by switching into lower gears. If you pass one of these spots at or below the speed limit, you have no penalty. There's no heat that you need to pay. And so as you can see here, there's a 5 here that's not too bad, and this is a very sharp turn, so anything over 2 is going to cost you heat. This one, anything over 3, and then this whole stretch here has no speed checks. So a strategy on this track would be to start to slow down around these turns, cool down some of your heat so that you can boost as fast as you can around the stretch there. So the game is very much about balancing that out and understanding when to use heat and when to get it back. If ever for any reason you have to pay heat and you don't have any heat to pay, so if you pass one of these speed checks, so let's say you only had 3 heat left and you pass this 5 going 9 instead of 5, you would have to pay 4 heat. You would try to pay 3, it wouldn't, and then you would have to try to pay another one and it wouldn't work, and you would spin out. Spinning out happens if you pass a speed check and you don't have the heat to pay it. It first moves you back to the spot before the speed check. So you go backwards until the first available spot before the speed check. Then you take on extra stress cards into your deck. If you're in first or second gear, you take 1. If you're in third or fourth gear, you take 2. You want to try to avoid spin outs as much as possible, because not only does it pull you back in the track itself, but you also get these stress cards which add instability and inconsistency to your deck. Okay, a few extra things about the slipstreaming. First, when you slipstream, it does not count towards your speed. I think I said that already. So if I was going 6 and I crossed this and I was able to slipstream, that extra 2 would not count against that speed count. So it would still be 6 and I'd only pay 1 heat. If you slipstream and that pushes you past a speed check, then your speed still does count, and while it doesn't add the 2, it does do the check. So sometimes you don't want to slipstream because it'll push you past that speed check and you lose a lot of heat, or you can't afford that heat. And finally, slipstreaming is not allowed after you cross the finish line for the final lap. It simply is not part of that final stretch of it. So again, everybody chooses a certain number of cards to determine which gear they are in, and then each player in order does a few steps. They first move according to their speed. Then if they happen to be in the last position in a 4 or less player game, or in the last 2 positions in a 5 or 6 player game, they get what's called adrenaline, where they get to go 1 extra spot and they get a cooldown for free. So cooldown basically means any heat card that is in your hand, you can discard and put it back in your heat pile to be used again later. Then cooldown and heat is paid for, the slipstreaming happens, and then each player has 1 opportunity to boost. If you, at the end of your turn, you played all 3 of your cards, want to boost, it's like playing another stress card where you just find the next speed card 1 through 4 and go that extra number of spaces. You can boost once per turn, and it does cost you a heat to do so. Finally, you can discard any cards that are not stress or heat cards and draw back up to 7. So let's see a few of these plays in action. So first green plays one of their stress cards and another, and ends up getting a 3 with it, goes up to this spot here. They also decide to boost, which gets them another 3, and they discard 2 hands, and they're done, and draw back up to 7. Yellow in this case, I chose 3 and 4 to go up to 7, so I move up 7 first. Then it says here you can cool down because I'm in gear 2, and it gives me 1 free cooldown. I do have a heat in my hand. If you don't have any heat, the cooldown doesn't do anything. So I go ahead and cool down 1 heat. So now I have 7. You always want to keep track of that. It's basically a resource. Then if I want, I could boost, but I decide not to. Then I can choose one of these 3 cards, not the stress card, to discard. I choose not to. And then I draw back up. And see, now I don't have any heat in my hand because it's all here in my deck, but I do have 2 stress cards. There's my extra 5 speed upgrade. Notice it's not a speed card, so it won't be pulled for any boosts or stress cards, but This is my new hand. And then everyone else goes in their turn. You'll be able to see, I believe blue is able to slipstream in this case. So as you can see, they end here, which is right next to another player, and that allows them to go 2 forward if they want. Again, they might not want to. For instance, blue's speed right now is 8, and so if a slipstream would push them past that 5, then they would have to pay 3 heat to do it, and they may not want to do that. But in this case, it works out well for them. And then there are 2 automatic players that are determined. Basically, these cards pull up randomly and determine how far they go. And there's a system for that, but just know that they do continue to go a certain number of spaces each turn. They won't prevent you from winning if they get in first, but they do help make the track a little more active and allow more opportunities to slipstream and whatnot. That's it. Now you move to the next. Everybody chooses their gear and their cards, and it continues, and play continues. Notice I'm in second gear now, so I can pick actually any of these gears that I want. Because if I wanted to jump to 4, I could do so, but I would have to pay a heat. Again, paying heat lets you do lots of things, and so it's good to use. Don't try to just avoid getting heat at all. You want heat, but you just don't want to run out of heat when you need it, because you don't want to spin out, and so you want to cool down when you have that opportunity to get more heat back into your pile, so then you can use the heat when it makes sense. So my tactic in this game, and it worked because I was able to win, is while I'm in lower gears, I have to be in lower gears around these tighter corners. That's when I'm cooling down heat and building that up, and then as soon as I hit past this curve, I slam on the gas and go from second to 4th gear to spend a heat and go as far as I possibly can. And even in the last lap, even add boost to just get that extra bit. And in some cases, you want to take those curves, if you have the heat to do it, you want to take those curves a little faster than you would normally. Again, always be paying attention to that. The BGA implementation gives you a lot of information about you and every other player. This is your current gear position, the current amount of heat you have left. This is your speed once everybody's chosen. This is the distance to the next corner, which lap you're on, and your current pole position, basically, the current order within the race. We raced 3 laps around, and the first person when somebody crosses the finish line, you finish out that round. They don't automatically win. So if somebody crosses the finish line and then somebody in that same round crosses past them, they would finish ahead. So you try to go as far as you can past the finish line, every bit that you're able to. And like I said before, you can't slipstream it if you pass that finish line on that last lap, but you do want to go as far as you can. That is heat. It's fairly simple, just a few things to remember, and it's really all about managing those heat cards, making sure you have them when you need them and save them up when you don't. Hope this is helpful.